Hi, I'm Jim Posner, and this is the Don't Panic Project. We provide conversations to help empower, inspire, and educate people suffering from stress, anxiety, and depression. Today's guest is Patrick McKeown. Patrick is a world-renowned expert in the Buteyko Breathing Method, and he is the author of at least 8 best-selling books. Is it 8? I actually lost count now, Patrick.
I've 8 books. They're not all bestsellers, but some of them within their own categories. But they do pretty good overall.
And your best-known one is called The Oxygen Advantage, correct?
The Oxygen Advantage is the most latest one. And
all right.
It's the most popular.
Excellent. And Patrick is an Irishman, and he's based in Galway and travels and lectures extensively around the world. He's the director of education at the world's foremost Buteyko Breathing Method Clinic and the Buteyko Clinic International, and he has trained thousands of people in this method, and he's been doing this since 2003. So welcome, Patrick. And, as I was saying, I'm really excited to have you as a guest. You know that I'm a mindfulness meditation instructor, and, teaching proper breathing is a cornerstone of a good mindfulness practice. So to have you on to have this conversation, I'm really excited. But you know what? Before we really get into the mechanics of breathing properly and all that entails, can you tell us a little bit about how you grew up, maybe your journey, and how you kind of came into this, what I would call not so common, career?
I came across it by accident. I would have never chosen it as a career path, and most people wouldn't encourage it as a career path. I'm in it. So my background is I've done economics at a university in Ireland called Trinity College in Dublin, and I have an MA in economics and business. But I had a lot of asthma and I had a lot of sleep issues, and I would have been typically a kind of stressed individual. I was a mouth breather all the way up to my early 20s, and my concentration was always affected.
A mouth breather, you said?
A mouth breather. So I was persistently breathing through an open mouth. I was constantly sighing. You'd notice my breathing. Like if you were in a room with a group of people, you would hear my breathing. So my breathing rate would have been faster. It would have been irregular. And it was through the mouth. And I also snored at night, and I had obstructive sleep apnea, even though I didn't know what it was at the time. But I was constantly tired, so it was having huge impact on my day. But, I got on with it, as people do. Concentration is affected, but you end up studying more to get the grades. Now, not everybody's going to have the drive to do that. I just had the drive. I wanted to do it, but I had to put in the hours. So it was 1997 or 1998, I read an article in an Irish newspaper, and it was about the work of a Russian doctor, Konstantin Buteyko. And he said 2 things. He said, breathe through your nose, and he said, breathe lightly. So I used his method. There's an exercise to decongest his nose. So I found it online at the time, even though there wasn't a whole lot available back in 97. And I started making the switch to nose breathing. I taped my mouth at night, which sounds a bit bizarre, but that's what I did. I also wore breathe right strips across my nose to open up my nose because I was feeling too suffocated otherwise. And I started having the best night's sleep I ever had.
Wow, by taping your mouth shut?
By taping my mouth shut. And we've been advocating our clients to tape their mouth shut since 2002. So I have thousands of people taping their mouth shut. And tens of thousands of people have read the books, and they tape their mouth shut.
Wow.
So
I'm assuming you're not using duct tape, right? It's like...
No, we use a... Well, there's now actually specific tapes on the market. When we started off, there wasn't. But there's doctors in the United States that have developed tapes. One is called lip seal tape. And it's a paper tape you put across your lips.
Huh.
But you cannot have a good night's sleep unless you breathe through your nose. And anybody, if you think of it like we're talking about quantity of sleep when we talk about quality of sleep, nobody talks about few people talk about quality of sleep. They do talk about, yes, don't stay up late looking at your iPad or, turn all that stuff off and have a cool bedroom, have an airy bedroom. But breathing through your nose has been studied that if you sleep with your mouth open versus your mouth closed, you don't have a deep sleep with your mouth open. So
Wow.
Any of your listeners, if they wake up with a dry mouth in the morning, they're likely to be tired, and also it sets their day off on a wrong note.
Wow, that's really interesting. So actually have to circle back to something you just said. Buteyko had a method for decongesting the nose, and you did that. So can you give us the quick and dirty on how to go about doing that?
Sure, and this is not new stuff, you know. Since 1923, it has been written about in the literature. You can open up your nose if you hold your breath. Now, the only thing I would say that if your listeners are prone to panic attacks, the feeling of suffocation is going to make them scared.
Right.
But you could give it a go, but start off within your limits. But basically, it takes a normal breath in through your nose, a normal breath out through your nose, pinch your nose with your fingers, and just gently nod your head up and down, holding your breath. And continue holding your breath until a medium to strong air hunger, and then let go, but breathe in through your nose. Wait a minute and do that 5 or 6 times. The nose will be temporarily free. The more you breathe through your nose, the more the nose opens. We've had clients who were scheduled for turbinate reduction surgery. The turbinates in the nose were enlarged. After breathing through the nose and practicing the various exercises when they went back to the ENT, turbinates had shrank. Nasal polyps as well. Not in severe cases, but with mild, say moderate cases. So it's amazing. The human body is amazing, Jim, but you know, people who have nasal obstruction, they don't breathe through their nose. Well, if you don't breathe through your nose, it's never going to work for you.
Right. Well, that's already, we're about 5 minutes into this conversation and some really powerful effects of just, cultivating the skill of breathing into the nose, which leads me to my next question, actually. Are most people, so what you're basically saying and maintaining in your research is that we're supposed to breathe through the nose. We're not supposed to breathe through our mouths. Yeah. It's unhealthy to breathe through our mouths. But people that are mouth breathers, are they conditioned at some point early on in their life to start breathing through their mouth? Or are they kind of born with that inane mouth breathing?
Yes. We're born with the nose. So it's pretty much impossible for an infant to actually breathe through the mouth because there's a separate windpipe. The windpipe from the nose is going directly into the lungs, and the entry from the mouth is going directly into the stomach. So the baby can breastfeed and breathe at the same time. And it's after a few months then that there's a change actually that happens in the structure of the airway, that the baby then can start actually breathing through the mouth. So infants who don't have sufficient nasal airway, it can be really problematic for them because they need their nose to breathe, and if their nose isn't working properly, unfortunately some of them will die of asphyxiation. So but most babies will probably, they'll maintain nose breathing all the way through until possibly they start teething, and then sometimes when they start teething they get an upper respiratory infection, so their nose gets a bit stuffy, and when their nose is stuffy, then they start a habit of mouth breathing. And I'd say it's going to be a combination of genetics, environment, habit, neuroplasticity. The young infant develops the habit. The other thing was the baby breastfed or not. Breastfeeding is not just about nutrition. It's also about manipulating the muscles of the jaws and face. So if the baby is breastfeeding, the baby is going to develop good facial structure. And then it's easy for that baby to keep the mouth closed. Whereas if the baby is bottle fed, it's a lot easier to get milk through the bottle, so it doesn't develop the muscles of the face. So you get better muscle tone through breastfeeding as opposed to bottle feeding. And, pacifiers and things like that, and all of these things will influence. But mouth breathing is endemic in children. It's 50% of children. Our ancestors didn't mouth breathe. The first documented case of mouth breathing are only 400 years ago. And this was from people in the UK, from upper middle class backgrounds who had access to sugar. So sugar has been around in Europe since about the 10th century. And there seems to be some link between processed foods and mouth breathing. So, this shape of the skull is changing generation to generation. It's becoming more narrow. The airways are being compromised, and then sleep is going to be affected. I don't know if people can address anxiety unless they can have a good night's sleep.
Yeah, I agree.
I think it's going to be a big problem, and we really need to get back down to the basics here. The benefits of nose breathing, just a couple of points. Your nose is directly linked to your diaphragm. Your mouth is directly linked to your chest. You cannot breathe using your diaphragm effectively if you breathe with an open mouth.
Huh,
And even for stability of emotions, regular respiration, regular emotions, the whole thing about taking a deep breath is actually correct. The instruction is correct, but the interpretation is not correct. So a deep breath just means diaphragmatic. The best person to teach us how to breathe is a 3-month-old baby. It's through the nose, it's regular, it's light, and it's driven by the diaphragm. Or an animal. And all animals, pretty much, with the exception of a dog and a penguin and a gannet, they breathe through their nose. So you can imagine all of the thousands of species on Earth, they all nose breathing. And the human is the one that doesn't know what its nose is for. So, that's the way it is.
It's interesting. When I teach, I talk about the importance of breathing into the diaphragm, and obviously this conversation, we're taking a much deeper dive, but you just referenced, we can all learn to breathe properly from the 3-month-old. And I always say that it's like, if you look at a baby in a crib, their belly is just kind of,
yes,
going in and out. And I talk about how, breathing into the chest is this fight or flight response methodology of breathing. And as we grow older, we kind of unlearn how to breathe properly into the diaphragm because we're triggered with all these fight or flight things that, kind of trigger us to take these short breaths into the chest, which I guess are also typically through the mouth. You walk outside, you see, you hear a police alarm, or you look at your phone these days and somebody didn't email you back, or whatever the case may be. You get these kind of fight or flight triggers much more often than we were designed to really deal with, and it basically has retrained us to breathe incorrectly. So you say you were a mouth breather. So, can you tell us some of the negative effects of being a mouth breather?
Sure. There's a range of different effects depending on the individual. So I'll kind of summarize them. On a very basic level, if you breathe through your nose, it increases oxygen uptake in the blood by about 10 to 15%. So people who breathe through their nose will have better oxygen uptake. If you breathe through your nose, it maintains end-tidal carbon dioxide, or arterial CO2. So basically, carbon dioxide pressure in the blood is more normal. And carbon dioxide is not just a waste gas. You need it for the release of oxygen from the red blood cells. So mouth breathing causes a deficiency or less than adequate carbon dioxide. And because carbon dioxide is necessary for the release of oxygen to the cells, if you're breathing too hard and you're getting rid of too much CO2, well, less oxygen is getting delivered to the cells. A third factor is that carbon dioxide also relaxes smooth muscle embedded in the blood vessels. And the carotid arteries can constrict due to chronic overbreathing. And they can constrict in order to reduce oxygen delivery to the brain by up to 50%. So somebody who thinks that it's good to take big breaths are kidding themselves. It's entirely the worst thing that they can be doing, because the big breath, all it's doing is getting rid of carbon dioxide. It's not adding any more oxygen to the blood, because under normal circumstances, your blood is already pretty much close to fully saturated. But by getting rid of carbon dioxide, your blood vessels are constricting, and the amount of oxygen delivered to the cells, including, organs, including the brain and heart, is diminished. Another thing about nose breathing is that, of course, it's filtration, moistening, humidifying, and especially during sleep. If you're mouth breathing during sleep, you're traumatizing the upper airways. Moisture gets sucked out of the upper airways, it makes them sticky. And if, for instance, you have snoring and possibly even obstructive sleep apnea whereby you stop breathing, well, when the airways collapse, they're sticky, so it takes a lot more time for them to reopen. And at that point, then your blood oxygen saturation drops to an even greater extent. So it increases the severity of obstructive sleep apnea. Your nose is very important for the brain. Your nose imposes a resistance to your breathing during the day to slow down your breathing naturally. So it it imposes a resistance of about 50% to your breathing. So when you breathe slowly, there's a cluster of neurons in the brain which spy on your breathing. And it's spying on your breathing that if you breathe fast, these cluster of neurons are relaying symptoms of agitation to the rest of the brain. Whereas when you breathe slowly, these cluster of neurons are relaying symptoms of calm. So Stanford Medical School in March of last year, they first identified this in mice, but it was only then in March that they published a paper. It was discovered in humans. And they said it's the pacemaker within the brain, and its purpose is to spy on your breathing. We all know that stress makes us breathe faster, but fast breathing makes us stressed.
Right.
And, you know, that's the feedback loop there. Well, if you're breathing through your mouth, you're going to be fast breathing. So it's really important to look at how is a person breathing, because I know in mindfulness, traditionally, they'll say, don't change your breathing, but you have to consider that mindfulness was developed or discovered, you know, put together 2,500 years ago. People were living more naturally. You know, they didn't have the stresses of modern day living. Mindfulness will not address breathing pattern disorders. And you touched on it. You said that people, you know, they do be mouth breathing or their upper chest breathing. They're having noticeable breathing. But that becomes their everyday breathing. So that's carrying through to their everyday life. Well, that's breathing pattern disorder. And that's the same factors that would be in, say, stress breathing. So if you were to talk to somebody, any of your clients, and you say to them, well, how do you breathe when you get stressed? Do you breathe faster or do you breathe slower? They'll tend to say, well, my breathing speeds up when I'm stressed. Or do you breathe using your upper chest or your diaphragm? They use their upper chest. Stress breathing, you sigh more. You take larger breaths. Your breathing becomes more noticeable. It's often through the mouth. So how we breathe during stress is mouth breathing, chest breathing, more sighing, irregular breathing, noticeable breathing. But they are the exact same traits as breathing pattern disorders. So when I see somebody coming into me, I measure their breath hold time. And their breath hold time from the book, we call it BOLT, or it's taken from the Buteyko Method. So I measured them. I asked them to sit down for about 10 minutes or so. And then I asked them to take a normal and to pinch their nose and to hold their breath. And to hold the breath until they feel the first definite desire to breathe. And then let go and to resume normal breathing. So that's the length of time that they hold their breath for provides you good feedback of how functional their breathing is. People with a low breath hold time are more prone to dysfunctional breathing patterns. Well, the vast majority of people with anxiety and stress and depression, they have got a low breath hold time. So mindfulness is wonderful. It's absolutely tremendous to take attention out of the mind, focus it on the breath. But it's not going to address breathing pattern disorders. We need to go one step further there. We have to consider that modern life is having a huge impact on breathing. And breathing is not just, yes, it's an involuntary activity, but it's influenced by so many things. I think we also need to look at how do we breathe.
So that presents the obvious next question here, Patrick. Can you maybe give us some tips on how to cultivate the skill of breathing properly? Maybe a couple of little exercises aside from, taping our mouth when we sleep, which I actually find really interesting. I'm going to look more into that. But just like some other,
sure.
Some other.
So a very good exercise to start off with, I think, which will be more pertinent to your listeners, especially those with panic attacks, would be many small breath holds. The people who should be doing meditation often find it very difficult to do. In actual fact,
that's the big irony of it, right? It's people that I can't quiet my mind. It doesn't, it's not working, and then they don't do it, and
they give it up.
Exactly.
Whereas I target a little bit different. I get them to do exercise and breathing exercise involving physical exercise, and also, even simple things, which I can show you there. So what I'd like you to do, Jim, is just take a normal breath in through your nose and normal breath out through your nose. Pinch your nose.
Only normal. Pinch it after after I exhale.
Yeah. So it's only normal, though. I shouldn't hear it. So just normal breath in, normal breath out. Pinch your nose, hold your nose. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let go and just breathe normal. Just breathe normal for 10 seconds. And again, normal breath in, normal breath out. Pinch your nose, hold your nose. One, two, three, four, five. Let go and breathe normal for about 10 seconds. And again, normal breath in through your nose, normal breath out through your nose. Pinch your nose and hold your nose. And to let go and to breathe normal for about 10 seconds or so. And again, normal breath in through your nose, normal breath out through your nose. Pinch your nose, hold your nose. And to let go, but to breathe in and breathe normal then for 10 seconds or so. And again, normal breath in through your nose, normal breath out through your nose. Pinch your nose, hold your nose. And to let go and to breathe in through your nose and breathe normal for about 10 seconds or so. So I'll continue this for about 20 seconds and I'll explain then what was happening. And again, normal breath in, normal breath out. Pinch your nose, hold your nose. And to let go and to breathe in and breathe normal for 10 seconds or so. And again, normal breath in, normal breath out. Pinch your nose, hold your nose. And to let go then to breathe in and to breathe normal for 10 seconds. Okay. So when you're doing these exercises, check a number of things. One is check the amount of saliva in your mouth. The second one is check your body temperature. Is it cold or warm or the same? And the other is to check if you're feeling more drowsy or more alert. When you're doing a small breath hold like that, we're introducing a small air hunger. So what I'm doing there is I'm just gently increasing CO2 in the blood because you've stopped breathing. Now, the central chemoreceptors in the brain, they're responsible for your breathing. And basically, they monitor it's carbon dioxide that's the primary stimulus to breathe. So what I've just done there is we've done small breath holds just to expose you to a slight increase of CO2. And that's very helpful for starting off with, say, somebody with panic or anxiety. It's a calming effect. As you hold your breath, nitric oxide is a gas that will pool inside the nasal cavity. And when you release your nose, you breathe through your nose and you carry that nitric oxide into your lungs. And nitric oxide is very helpful for redistributing the blood throughout the lungs. So it improves arterial oxygen uptake. So that exercise there is one that people can start off with. And then what they can do is they can go into this exercise. So maybe if you just kind of lie back into the chair and just put one hand on your chest and one hand just above your navel. And just allow your shoulders to drop and to relax. And all you want to do is just pay attention to your breathing. So you may feel a slightly colder air. So you feel the breath coming in there and you feel the breath leaving there. And you feel the breath coming in and you feel the breath leaving. So all you're doing here is you're just gently softening the breath. That's all. So what I would like you to do is you're paying attention to the breathing. You're paying attention to maybe feeling the slightly colder air coming into your nose and the slightly warmer air leaving your nose. And just gently soften your breath so that you're slowing it down. But I need you to slow it down to the point that you feel a slight air hunger. So if you feel panicked, just take a rest. It's normal. Sometimes people can feel a bit panicked. But I'd like you to feel a slight air hunger as if you're going for a walk, but don't breathe through your mouth. All you're doing is just gently softening the breath. You're just gently softening the breath. Soften the breath to allow carbon dioxide accumulate in the blood. Carbon dioxide will help which are blood vessels, but also a help release of oxygen from the red blood cells to the cells. So you're just slowing down your breath, you're just quietening your breath. So visually, your breathing movements will have reduced by about 20 to 30%. You should feel that you're not getting enough air. It shouldn't be in any way stressful. It could be a little bit uncomfortable, but it shouldn't be too bad. And as you're doing this, pay attention to your circulation, your blood circulation. Pay attention to the amount of saliva in the mouth. And pay attention to, you know, eyes will go glassy when you do this, but also, do you feel more alert or do you feel drowsy? Okay, so you can take a rest at that. So,
sorry.
What we're doing here is we're activating the parasympathetic response within about 3 to 4 minutes. Normally, people will feel an increase of their body temperature. And normally, they will feel and experience an increased watery saliva in the mouth. So meditation itself, if we were just doing anapanasati, we're following the breath, which is wonderful. But the mind has a tendency to wander. And then we bring it back and the mind wanders. But if you follow your breathing with the purpose of creating an air hunger, your mind is going to be more anchored onto the breath. And it's not thinking about the air hunger, but for some reason, the air hunger that you experience focuses the brain. And we're using the brain here, as you are, to train it, to hold its attention on something exclusively for a period of time without distraction. But if the mind has a tendency to wander, it's difficult to train the brain. Whereas when you have something like air hunger, the brain is likely to be more focused. Now, when people with panic attacks start off, they don't like doing the exercise because it creates a feeling of panic. But that's what we're doing, you know, but it's totally under the person's control. So I say to them, well, don't do it for 3 minutes. Do it for 10 seconds. Do 10 seconds of air hunger and then do 10 seconds of normal breathing. 10 seconds of air hunger, 10 seconds of normal breathing, and just gently condition your body towards, you know, the theory would be a higher tolerance of carbon dioxide.
Gotcha. So this is a relatively quick way of activating the parasympathetic nervous system, which you just alluded to, which, well, if you could expand a little bit on what activating the parasympathetic nervous system can do for you.
Yes. So when we're talking about the autonomic nervous system, it's the functions of the body that we don't have to consider. You know, we're all standing here in a wonderful, intelligent body that's the human body. All of those functions are being conducted without us even to have to think about it. Like, we never consider the intelligence of the body that we occupy. We seldom consider the 70 to maybe 100,000 miles of blood vessels. There's blood constantly flowing through them. There's oxygen getting released to the cells. The food that we're eating is getting oxidized. It's generating energy. Our blood pressure has been maintained. Our breathing is happening involuntarily. And all of those things are happening. And that's the intelligence, the nature and the intelligence of the human body. We really have to consider that the man will never create anything like the human body. Never possible. You know, and nature has done it. So, and every one of us has that intelligence at our disposal, but we never appreciate it. We're stuck in our head all the time. You know, we have this thing that we're just constantly stuck in our thoughts. And asleep to life, because you can't experience life unless you're connected with bringing your senses directly into life. So the autonomic nervous system, it's got two branches. One is the sympathetic response, which would be kind of more fight or flight, that's stress behavior. And then, of course, our parasympathetic is our rest and digestion. And, you know, it's good to go from parasympathetic into sympathetic and parasympathetic into sympathetic. The human body is very resilient. You know, if we go for a jog, it's more sympathetic activity. But if you do meditation and relaxation, it's parasympathetic activity. We cannot be switched on all the time, but neither can we be switched off all the time. So when we go for a jog, we want to enter more sympathetic. And when we go into rest and digestion, we want to enter parasympathetic. But Jim, some people can't switch off. So they're in more sympathetic mode, and those people need to switch off. Because if you can't switch off, then it's difficult to sleep. And insomnia would be that the mind is active. You know, you're lying there, you're wrapped up in a lovely duvet, everything is nice and warm, all the conditions are ideal, and your head is whirring. You know, and really we want to be able to reduce the incessant thought activity that's going through the mind and the incessant thinking. And that's, of course, where you come in. And also, carbon dioxide has a calming effect on the brain, because the lighter you breathe, the more CO2, and as a result, it opens up the carotid arteries and it allows more oxygen to be delivered to the brain. And maybe some of your listeners experienced panic attacks at some point. They were told, get a brown paper bag. Well, a brown paper bag was not to bring in more oxygen. The whole purpose of the brown paper bag was to trap carbon dioxide. The individual was breathing too hard. They're getting rid of too much carbon dioxide. The brown paper bag is there to hold onto the carbon dioxide, to bring it into the body, to allow the blood vessels to open, to allow more oxygen reach the brain. And that's how it had a calming effect. But we say to the person, get your breathing right so you're not losing too much CO2 in the first place. And then you won't need the brown paper bag because you won't have the symptoms. Your resilience to the stress or the crowded place or driving your car, you'll be able to cope with that. We should always be able to cope with some sort of stress in our lives. And the human body, as I said, is so intelligent that we can do it, but we need to tap into how to do it.
No doubt. So there is something to that old, what I thought was an old wives' tale about breathing into the brown paper bag, huh? It really can't.
No, physiologically it makes, in actual fact, what one exercise that I use, we mimic the brown paper bag in that we have people cup their hands. And that would be very useful for your listeners to do as well, that you're just cupping. The brown paper bag, by the way, is not safe. Because even though it's trapping carbon dioxide, you're not getting a replenishment of oxygen. So anytime your listeners do get into a situation of, say, a panic attack, the easier they catch it, the better. And the whole purpose would be to cup their hands and trap the carbon dioxide, but it's safe because they're going to get oxygen coming in through their fingers as well.
Right.
But it will pool carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is not that waste gas that people talk about. It's essential for human survival.
Huh. Really, really interesting. So let me present this to you. If I was a student about to maybe take a test and or an athlete, prior to the big game, maybe if I did 4 minutes of the intentional breathing exercise that you just discussed, and to help kind of activate the parasympathetic nervous system. I mean, we all know that some degree of the fight or flight can also help in certain sports and that type of thing. But there's also something to be said for being able to kind of, calm that anxious mind as well, especially if you're taking a test. And so if you were to do 3 or 4 minutes of this intentional breathing exercise that we discussed, that would activate the parasympathetic nervous system and perhaps would help you prior to a perceived stressful event, such as a test or an interview, something along those lines. No.
Yes, I think it would be wonderful. The first thing that I would do is make sure that you have a good night's sleep.
Definitely.
And part of that is to actually slow down your breathing and to feel a slight air shortage for about 15 minutes. So anybody who's suffering from insomnia, while you're downstairs watching even a little bit of light TV, just slow down your breathing. Now, we will have a belt coming out in about 6 to 8 weeks, because sometimes people have difficulty slow down their breathing. So I've kind of put together a belt that they wear on their midriff, and they'll wear that, and it will apply just enough resistance to their breathing to cause it to slow down. So if they slow down their breathing for about 15 minutes before sleep, and then to breathe through their nose during sleep, already that's starting them off on a good note. When they go to their exam, is absolutely to help focus the mind and to help reduce distracting thoughts, is to focus on your breathing and slow it down for, say, between 5 and 20 minutes. Now you will be relaxed, but you might be too relaxed. You're going to be focused. So after doing reduced breathing for about 20 minutes, I have people do stronger breath holds, and I take them out of that relaxed state into a parasympathetic state. I also use the same approach with athletes. I have them do a good night's sleep the night before, wake up alert. It's very conducive to, a calm mind and a productive mind. Do reduced breathing and do meditation before the event, but now they will be too relaxed. Then I get them to do 6, maybe 7 stronger breath holds. Now it pushes them into a sympathetic mode, but they are focused. Because anytime you're stressed, it's very good to stop breathing. Now I can kind of give you a demonstration if you wish of just a smaller breath hold so that your listeners
it sounds like that's another big piece of what we just talked about, activating the parasympathetic, and now using the breath hold.
So now I'm going to just go easy enough with you, but at least you get an idea of it, yeah?
Yeah.
And this will also help to open up the nose. So if you block one nostril for me, breathe through it.
Of course, now I'm taking a deep breath in through my mouth. Okay.
No, in through your nose. Okay. And just block one nostril, breathe through it. Okay. And then block the other nostril and breathe through it. Okay. So if I'm hearing it correctly, your right nostril is more congested than your left, or at least there's more resistance in your right nostril than your left. But I'm only basing it on the microphone here.
I think so.
So what I'd like you to do is to stand up and take a normal breath into your nose, a normal breath out through your nose, pinch your nose, hold your breath.
I'm just going to move back so I can see.
That's fine. So a normal breath into your nose, a normal breath out through your nose, pinch your nose, hold your nose, and walk 10 paces holding your breath, 10 paces. And to let go and to breathe. And just breathe as normal for about a minute or two. Again, I don't want to go too strong because people with panic attack, it would just be too much for them too soon. But they could try this. And if they feel 10 paces is too much, they could do 5 paces. People with anxiety, anytime you're stressed, do this exercise. It's like meditation, but you're stopping breathing. And if you want to try it again, open up your nose as well. Take a normal breath into your nose, normal breath out, pinch your nose, hold your nose, and walk 10 paces holding your breath. And then to let go, but always breathe in through your nose at the end of it. Now you'll notice that as you hold your breath, the mind stops thinking. So it's a great distraction remedy as well for an active mind. Kind of takes you out of that frame of reference. If you were to try that for 5 or 6 times, people could be trying that 2 or 3 times a day. So the stronger breath holds, now I went fairly easy there, but the stronger breath holds will activate the sympathetic response. Now with athletes, we go 10 steps further because we want to drop oxygen levels in the blood. So I use the exercises to simulate high altitude training. But that wouldn't happen just what we did there with yourself. It was kind of easy enough going.
Right. Wow. Really, really interesting. So the idea being first that you're activating the parasympathetic nervous system to kind of relax, but the idea is that you almost don't want to get too relaxed.
Yes.
But in a certain sense, you're kind of
focused,
calming the mind and refocusing. Maybe grounding would be a good word, and then just kind of using the breath holds to almost create a certain intensity, a purposeful, like a purposeful intensity almost that is not based on a fear or anxiety, but that you're cultivating with intention to help you perform better. Interesting. Really interesting.
It would make a huge difference.
Wow.
I was going into exams. I was having dreadful night's sleep. I had a racing mind. and there's no way you can concentrate. So people then are labeled as being less intelligent because they don't do well.
Right.
And it's not because of the fact of intelligence. It's because they've developed poor breathing patterns. Do you know 50% of studied children are persistently mouth breathing? And these children are tired. And if you're sleepy, the literature shows that you have 10 times the risk of learning difficulties in school. 10 times the risk. Nobody is telling these kids any different. And I think it's a failure, I'm sorry to say, of healthcare professionals and doctors, because the nose is not just the two holes in the face. It's been well documented. It serves a number of wonderful functions, and getting more oxygen delivery throughout the body is one of those functions.
And I just want to say also for our listeners and viewers here that Patrick has written a number of books about how breathing can help kids and how to train kids with their breathing also. So,
Yes.
Definitely.
I'm just going to add, I also had 2 papers published last year in the American Journal, the American Thoracic Society, the American Journal of Critical Care Medicine. I was a co-author on both papers, and we looked at asthmatic mouth breathing children. Most asthmatic children are unfortunately mouth breathers, as I was. My nose was constantly stuffy, and so is theirs. And then their sleep is affected. So if you have nasal congestion, you're twice as likely to have a sleep problem. So we had them studied, we had them tested, these kids, and it improved all of their sleep parameters. They were missing less days off school. Their asthma improved as well. And I've also been involved with 3 other papers indirectly through my books, and another paper in conjunction with a hospital here in Ireland, that we reduced symptoms of the nose by 70% at 3-month follow-up. And that included snoring. You know, because when you're looking at some of the questionnaires for ENTs, say, for instance, one questionnaire is called the Nasal Obstruction Symptom Evaluation. Trouble sleeping is one of the symptoms in that. You know, trouble sleeping. Snoring is one of the symptoms. And again, this ties really well in with anxiety. I don't think cognitive behavioral therapy will do it unless we start looking at sleep. I just think, you know, there's a piece missing in the puzzle. And breathing through the nose is going to be one of those pieces.
I think I know you're 100% correct. This is really, really fascinating stuff. I could talk about this all day with you. We are getting a little short on time, and I know you have another engagement. So if you could do me a favor, Patrick, if you could maybe send me some links to the papers, the research papers that you have published, I'd love to put them up underneath the interview when I put this up on YouTube and on my website.
Yes.
And, it's really great resources. So, I just want to thank you so much for your time. Do you have anything else you're working on right now that might be of interest, a new book coming out or anything like that?
I'm putting together a new book in terms of, I have a book on anxiety and panic, but it's been 8 years since I put that together. I put it together in mindfulness and the Buteyko Method, and combining the two along with a DVD. But I really think it's important now that I'm looking more at the literature, and I hope to have this new book. There's 2 books that are in the pipeline, but they won't be out for about 6 to 12 months. The bones and the skeletons of them are done, but there's still a little bit more work to do. That's always the way it is with me. I set a target. It never happens on time, but eventually it happens.
Well, the quality of the work that you put out eventually is amazing and very important. So I definitely thank you for that. And thanks so much for being on the Don't Panic Project. Again, Patrick McKeown, again, The Oxygen Advantage is his best known book, but he has 7 other amazing titles with really, really important information. And I just also want to thank the viewers and listeners for tuning into this edition of the Don't Panic Project. You can find more great conversations at www.thedon'tpanicproject.com or on my YouTube channel, and also now available on iTunes. My name is Jim Posner. I work with smart, forward-thinking individuals, corporations, schools, and athletes to help them harness the power of mindfulness to achieve peak performance and manage stress. See you next time on the Don't Panic Project. Thanks again, Patrick.
You're very welcome, Jim. Thank you.